Part 1: The Ghost in the House. The Crack in the Glass. The house was never quiet. Not with two toddlers whose every breath was a small, demanding gasp for attention, a constant, low-grade hum of life. But on that Tuesday, as the late afternoon sun bled a sickly orange across the hardwood floors, the silence was an alien presence. It was a vacuum, cold and absolute, and it pressed against my eardrums until they felt ready to burst, a physical manifestation of the lie I had just absorbed. He had been so careful, so meticulous in his facade, yet I had stumbled onto the first thread 2 weeks prior, a careless text, a name I didn't recognize, quickly deleted but not quickly enough. Now, that thread had unraveled into a monstrous tapestry of betrayal, and the air itself felt polluted by his lies. He confessed to the affairs. 2 women, both married, met on a twisted corner of the internet, a group called Seeking Affairs, on KIK. He confessed to the years of cybersex, the remote-controlled sex toys, the escorts who cost more than our monthly mortgage, the OnlyFans subscriptions, and the rampant, reckless use of our money on a private, depraved universe I knew nothing about. He even admitted to having her, one of them, the pregnant one who had recently given birth, here. In our house. In our bed, while my babies slept down the hall. The sheer audacity was a form of violence I hadn't anticipated. It was a calculated degradation of my sanctuary. The whisper of her perfume. The worst part wasn't the confession, but the night I came home early, a week before the final confrontation. The memory is a glitching horror reel, played on repeat in the dark theater of my mind. I'd walked into the kitchen, the bags of groceries heavy in my hands, exhausted from a double shift, and stopped dead. My internal warning system, dulled by years of his emotional manipulation, suddenly screamed. There, on the counter, next to the mail he'd forgotten to open, was a single, iridescent black feather. It was exotic, sleek, and utterly out of place, clearly not from any local pigeon or backyard sparrow. It was a relic of something secret and luxurious. And then, the faint, lingering scent, a floral note of expensive jasmine and something sharp, metallic, like fear or cheap adrenaline. I knew. I didn't need to see the empty wine glass he later claimed was his own, or the hastily made bed that smelled faintly of a stranger's cheap cologne layered over something cloyingly sweet. He was in the master bathroom shower, the water running, a frantic, desperate attempt to wash away the scent of his secret life. I stood there, paralyzed, the feather turning over and over in my sweat-slicked palm. The horrifying thought, I almost caught her. Maybe she was still here, hiding in the walk-in closet, terrified, a disposable accessory to his endless carnival of deceit, a silent co-conspirator in the violation of my home. The image was a physical punch to my gut. I dropped the groceries, the cans of beans rolling across the floor like forgotten ammunition, and ran out, driving until the city lights were just a smear in my rearview mirror, rationalizing my terror as fatigue and paranoia. But it wasn't fatigue. It was the absolute, crushing realization that the walls of my sanctuary were made of glass, and they had shattered, leaving me exposed to a cold, predatory world. The trap of his love. He's gone now, thankfully. He agreed to stay away from the children and submit to a psychiatric evaluation and a men's behavior change program. But the silence he left behind is not freedom, it's a cage. I sit here, clutching the police report I filed weeks ago regarding his violently volatile temper, the aggression toward our son, the constant yelling at our little boy, the terrifying, whiplash-inducing mood swings that turn him from a love-bombing charmer, showering me with flowers and cards, into a venomous, sulking stranger in less than 48 hours. His psychologist suspects borderline personality disorder or narcissism. I read the words, cold clinical labels, yet they don't explain the agony. They don't explain why I miss him. Why, knowing he participated in a group sex act with his pregnant mistress and 3 other men, knowing he risked my health by refusing protection, I had to get tested, knowing he has financially ruined us by spending every penny of our family income, I still find myself wanting to be kind, wanting to offer him comfort. I replay every sweet moment, every declaration of love, and try to reconcile the 2 men. It is the trauma bond, I know, the insidious, chemical addiction to the person who causes the pain, a state where I feel, messed up in my head, like I'm in a cult or something and I am brainwashed. I am a prisoner of my own distorted love, chained to a ghost of a man who never truly existed. The financial cinder block. The full scope of his financial destruction is the cinder block tied to my ankle. He controls everything. Has always controlled everything. Now, all I have are his terrified, vague admissions, huge, astronomical debts, all family income gone. I know about the hotels, the escorts, the subscription services. But that doesn't account for the scale of the void. Last night, I broke into his locked home office, my hands shaking with a criminal adrenaline rush. The financial documents I found weren't just bank statements, they were loan applications from shadowy, offshore institutions. The interest rates were astronomical, the collateral terrifyingly vague, mentioning digital assets and private data streams. It wasn't just a secret spending problem. It was a black hole of organized crime. He wasn't just paying for sex, he was entangled in something bigger, something dangerous. I found a single, cryptic text on an old burner phone, a device he'd used for years to maintain his double life. The collateral is in place. You have 48 hours, or the ledger goes public. The message was dated the day he went in for his evaluation. This wasn't about sex addiction anymore. This was about survival. The huge, crushing, almost impossible task revealed itself in that moment. I have 48 hours to unravel the entire web of his financial and sexual deceit, find the ledger he mentioned, the key to the entire operation, and secure my children's safety before whoever sent that text comes for what they are owed. And I have to do it all while battling the desperate, pathetic need to comfort the man who is trying to destroy me. 48 hours to dismantle a 6-year lie. The clock had started ticking the moment he was gone. Part 2. The Double Life of the Betrayed. The Ghost in the Machine. The next morning, I stood over the cribs, watching my children sleep. My little boy, the one his father constantly yelled at, his face peaceful in the early light. It was the only peace I'd felt in days. But even that peace was tainted. The black feather from the night I almost caught her was still on my bedside table, a constant, ugly reminder of the thin veil that had separated my reality from his depravity. I needed help, but I couldn't trust anyone in our circle. He had spent years isolating me, creating a siege mentality where his volatility was somehow my fault. I needed a specialist, a ghost hunter for the digital and emotional specters he'd left behind. I drove across town, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, stopping at a discreet, unmarked office building in a district of old money and quiet secrets. Inside, I met with Ms. Alana Vesper, a family law attorney and former forensic accountant, recommended by an anonymous post on a support forum. She had the eyes of someone who'd seen too much paperwork, too many broken vows. I laid out the whole sordid story, the 2-year-long affairs with married women, the group sex, the pregnant mistress, the debt, the burner phone, the terrifying 48-hour deadline. I even showed her the social media profiles of the 2 women, the profiles he'd chillingly provided me, like prizes, a final, twisted act of transparency. He gave you the evidence of his crime. Ms. Vesper asked, her voice dry as parchment, devoid of judgment but full of cold analysis. That's not confession, that's dominance. He wants you to feel his control even now. He wants you to hold the bomb, making you complicit in the fallout. The trauma bonds whisper. As we talked, a crushing wave of nausea washed over me. It wasn't the shock of the new revelations, it was the old, familiar shame of my weakness. I feel like I'm in a cult, I whispered, the words ragged, tasting of ash. Brainwashed. Why don't I hate him? Why do I just miss the comfort of the lie, the man who sent flowers every week for no reason? I recounted the first date, the manufactured chivalry when he declined intimacy, claiming he wanted more than just sex with me. It was the ultimate, calculated performance, a grand gesture that cemented my devotion. Every act of kindness, every moment of manufactured connection, was merely seasoning for the meal of my destruction. Ms. Vesper leaned forward, her expression intense. That's the bond, she said quietly. He starved you of emotional safety, then offered a crumb of validation, making the crumb taste like a feast. We don't have time to break the chemical addiction now. We have to redirect it. For 48 hours, your addiction isn't him. Your addiction is the truth. That is your lifeline, and your only weapon. Her words were a jolt of necessary, cold electricity, cutting through the emotional fog. The impossible triple threat. Ms. Vesper laid out the plan. It was audacious, reckless, and the only path to safety. We had 36 hours remaining. First, the retrieval. We needed to find the ledger, the financial document mentioned in the text. It must be a digital record, hidden in the house. It's the key to the criminal debt and the collateral. Second, the relocation. We needed to secure our digital and physical location. Since he and his accomplices know where I live, I had to be ready to leave with the children tonight. Ms. Vesper had a temporary, untraceable safe house ready. Third, the moral imperative. I had to warn the spouses of his mistresses. They, too, were victims, not only of infidelity but of potential financial and health risks due to his unprotected group sex acts. Contacting them before I was safe could expose me to them, or worse, to him if he got wind of my actions and cut his program short. Ms. Vesper created a secure, encrypted, untraceable message drop for me. You contact them, she said, her eyes intense. But only after we secure the ledger and you are in the new location. You have to be absolutely safe when you drop the bomb. The minute that ledger is public, the 48-hour clock turns into a countdown for your physical safety from the people who hold the debt. She emphasized the finality of the action, turning the hunt for justice into a desperate race against the clock. Part 3. The Search for the Ledger. The walls have eyes. Back in the house, the atmosphere was suffocating. Every shadow was a hiding place, every creak in the floorboards a warning. I had 34 hours left. The search for the ledger had to be silent, total, and invisible. He was a master of secrets, a meticulous planner of emotional destruction. His entire life was a secret, concealed beneath the performance of a devoted, albeit moody, husband. Where would a man who controls everything hide the evidence of his final, devastating crime, a crime that went far beyond mere infidelity? I started in his home office, which I had only briefly explored the night before. I pulled apart every book on the shelf, every fake antique box, and every hollow leg of the desk. Nothing. Just dust, old, meaningless receipts, and the lingering, metallic scent of his ambition. My mind was racing, trying to anticipate the twisted logic of a high-functioning narcissist. He wouldn't hide it in plain sight, but he would hide it somewhere that made him feel superior, a place only he could remember and access, a final, arrogant monument to his own cleverness. I focused on his emotional volatility. He saw everything I said and did as an attack towards him. He was a man obsessed with control, and his deepest secret would be protected by the most complicated layer of that control. The unseen vulnerability. I thought back to the very beginning of the lie. The internet chat, the NSFW Reddit posts, the dating profiles that dated back to before our children were born. He was always online, always connected, the ultimate digital ghost. He worked from home, but his work was clearly a cover for his elaborate double life. It hit me. The ledger wouldn't be paper. He wouldn't risk paper. It would be a digital phantom. I remembered the expensive, industrial-grade server tower he insisted on buying for his work-from-home job. He had always been pathologically protective of that server, keeping it locked in the damp, isolated corner of the basement, his own fortress of solitude. I went down to the basement, the air thick with damp and the smell of old concrete. The server was humming, a low, menacing sound, like a caged beast. He had set up a complex, multi-layered password system. I tried birthdays, anniversaries, even the names of the 2 mistresses that he had so cavalierly provided me with. All failed. The screen flashed, access denied. 3 attempts remaining. Panic clawed at my throat. If I locked it, the information could be permanently wiped, and the people who sent the threatening text would assume I had intentionally destroyed their collateral, triggering an immediate retaliation. I had 30 hours left. I stood facing the server, its cold metal casing mocking my intellectual and emotional exhaustion. The algorithm of betrayal. Suddenly, a flicker of memory. His one moment of genuine, non-calculated vulnerability, a moment I had dismissed as charming eccentricity, his obsessive love for a rare, antique gold coin he inherited from his grandfather. He often spoke of it in hushed tones, saying it represented his true value, his real self, the person beneath the love-bombing mask. He once told me, in a moment of drunken confidence, that no matter what happened, that coin's date would be the key to his safety vault. I typed in the 4-digit minting year of that coin. The screen hesitated for a terrifying second. Then, it flashed, access granted. The server was a maze of encrypted folders, filled with pornographic material, sexting logs, and financial transaction files, but one stood out, ominously named, the vault. Inside, the ledger was a single, monstrous spreadsheet. It wasn't just debt for escorts, it was a complex, 5-year scheme of money laundering for an East Coast criminal organization, involving multiple shell companies and offshore accounts. The collateral for the final, massive loan wasn't just the house, it was his entire digital network, the server, his accounts, and the hidden data that could implicate dozens of high-level operatives. The threatening text wasn't from a loan shark, it was from a high-level operative, warning him that his time was up. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from the sudden, powerful knowledge of the power I now held. I frantically copied the file onto a tiny, military-grade USB drive Ms. Vesper had given me. I had the bomb. Now I just needed to detonate it safely. The clock read 28 hours remaining. Part 4, The Escape and the Digital Drop. The Parting Glance. I stood in the middle of my marriage, a battlefield littered with emotional shrapnel. I looked at the photos on the mantel, him, smiling, holding our newborn daughter, and felt a chilling emptiness. The face in the picture was a stranger, expertly mimicking devotion. I realized that the love I mourned wasn't lost, it was stolen and replaced with a high-definition lie. This clarity was brutal, yet empowering, a clean, sharp incision that cut the trauma bond loose. It was no longer about forgiving him, it was about saving us. I had 25 hours. I packed 2 small bags for the children and 1 for myself. Just the essentials, the bare necessities for starting a ghost life. My eyes caught the black feather on the nightstand. I picked it up, not as a memento of betrayal, but as a talisman of the near miss that launched my escape, a reminder that I was 1 second away from disaster. I tucked it into the lining of my coat. I performed one last sweep of the house, wiping down all traces of my search in his office and the basement. The house was now cold, sterile, and hostile. It was time to leave this glass cage and step into the dangerous unknown. The untraceable drop. Ms. Vesper had arranged a temporary safe house, a quiet apartment above her sister's unused garage miles away, accessible only through a complicated sequence of codes and a private gate. It was anonymous, secure, and most importantly, his network didn't know the address. The drive was a blur of paranoia. Every car that pulled alongside me felt like an assassin sent by the organization. I got the children settled, their innocent questions about Daddy's long vacation breaking my heart, but their safety was my driving force. I sat down at the provided secure laptop. Time to detonate. I had 20 hours left. I had the ledger, the blueprint of his destruction and his criminal connections. Now, the final, agonizing step of the impossible task, I had to notify the spouses. I went to the encrypted messaging drop Ms. Vesper had created. This wasn't about revenge, it was about protecting innocent people from a man who treated lives as disposable toys. The group sex act, the fact that one woman was a new mother whose spouse was completely unaware of his family's health risks, the potential for STIs and the financial fraud, it was too grave to ignore. I crafted 3 identical, concise messages, stripped of emotion and focused only on the necessary facts: financial ruin, medical risk, proof attached. I included the relevant portions of the ledger showing their spouses' bank accounts were also being used as part of his money laundering scheme, connecting their lives directly to the crime and the dangerous organization. The finger on the trigger. I hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. The minute those messages landed, 3 other marriages would explode, and the criminal organization would know their collateral was compromised, triggering a chaotic scramble for self-preservation. The retaliation would be immediate, potentially targeting the man who was now perceived as their informant. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and focused on the metallic smell of the black feather in my coat pocket. I thought of my son flinching when his father raised his voice. I thought of the ghost of the other woman in my house. The trauma bond tried one last time to pull me back, to whisper, maybe he can change. Maybe if you just give him a chance, he'll be the man you want him to be. You'll ruin his life if you do this. I slammed my finger down, an act of sheer will against 6 years of brainwashing. Sent. The message was out. The clock was ticking not just for me, but for the dark enterprise he served. The ledger was now public. I had 19 hours left until he was due to check out of his evaluation facility and face the consequences of his arrogance. Part 5: The Fallout and the Threat. The Fury of the Wounded. The phone rang 15 minutes later. It wasn't him, and it wasn't the police. It was Ms. Vesper, her voice a low, urgent drone. The ledger is making waves. The organization knows. They just wiped his server clean, a remote detonation. They were too late to stop the drop, but they are eliminating all other traces. We're safe for now, the safe house is secure, but you need to understand the danger has shifted. This is no longer a civil case. This is a criminal manhunt. They will assume he released the ledger. He is a liability. They will target him. But they will also look for anyone else who knew about the vault. That means you and anyone you contacted. My blood ran cold. I had planned for his return, his eventual attempt at love bombing his way back, not his assassination. I had been so focused on my impossible task, the ledger, the spouses, the safety, that I hadn't factored in the wrath of true, organized criminals. He wasn't just a cheater and an abuser, he was a traitor to a powerful, unforgiving network. I looked at the cribs. My children were the only thing keeping me steady, their small, rhythmic breaths a powerful anchor. I had 15 hours until his release. The echoes of betrayal. Later that evening, a flurry of texts came through the encrypted channel, not from the criminal organization, but from the spouses. The messages were raw, devastating, and strangely validating. The wife of Mistress A, I'm filing for divorce. I had no idea about the debt, the testing, thank you for giving me the truth, no matter how ugly. Where did he hide the money? My accounts are frozen, I can't access anything. He drained us both. The husband of Mistress B, the new mother, my baby is healthy, thank God. But my wife is gone. The documents show she was funneling money from my business to him, that she helped him use our house for the affairs. You saved my life and my daughter's future from financial ruin and disease. I've contacted the police. I'm coming for him, and her. The shock was immense. I had expected anger directed at me, denial, or silence. I had expected victims. Instead, I found allies, survivors in their own right, energized by the clarity I had forced upon their lives. I felt a surge of cold, clean relief. I hadn't just destroyed a few lives, I had exposed a cancer that was spreading. This was the right kind of pain, the kind that led to healing. My need to hate him finally subsided, replaced by a clear, focused determination to see justice through. The final countdown. Ms. Vesper called again, her urgency palpable. He's scheduled to check out in 10 hours. The police are waiting outside, tipped off by the two spouses you contacted, but they need confirmation. The criminal organization will get to him first if he steps outside the facility, they have operatives everywhere. You need to provide the final link, his confession. We need the proof that he was the one who controlled the ledger and intended to use it to flee and betray the organization. Without it, he's just a debtor, not a criminal kingpin. We need his intent documented. The problem, his confession had been verbal, drip-fed, and laced with self-pity, designed to trigger my empathy, a masterwork of narcissistic gaslighting. I had nothing concrete. I sat in the silent safe house, staring at the walls. Where was the one piece of physical evidence that proved his intent? The server was wiped, the burner phone was silent, his office was sterile. I remembered his love for his true value, the antique gold coin. I suddenly remembered a detailed, rambling voice note he'd left on my old, private voice recorder weeks ago, after one of his explosive outbursts. He was trying to love bomb me back, and in his narcissistic, self-pitying rant, he might have overshared, trying to make his problem seem grander than my suffering. I had 8 hours. The trauma bond was broken, replaced by the grim necessity of survival. Part 6: The Bittersweet Victory. The Truth in the Silence. I frantically searched through my old boxes, the ones labeled "sentimental," that I had brought to the safe house. I found the voice recorder hidden beneath a pile of his old, sentimental cards, the love-bombing relics I had saved, ironically, as proof of his past affection. I pressed play, my hand trembling. The recording was crackly, his voice slurred, depressed, and sickeningly self-pitying, full of the rapid mood changes that marked his cycle of abuse. He was rambling about how misunderstood he was, how the pressure of keeping it all together, his double life, was crushing him. Then, a single, horrifying sentence, the climax of his narcissistic meltdown: "The only thing I truly control, the only way I can buy my way out of this hell I've made, is the digital record. The vault. I can wipe it all clean and start over with a clean slate, or I can use it to force their hand and take the money myself. I just need enough time before my assessment is over to make the final play and escape." It was the explicit link. His clear intent to use the ledger to leverage his escape and fleece the criminal organization. It was the key to his entire mindset, the ultimate narcissist's belief that he could control every outcome and manipulate even his criminal associates. I immediately uploaded the file to Ms. Vesper via the secure channel. The 48-hour deadline was about to expire. The final piece of the puzzle was in place. The arrest and the silence. 3 hours later, with 2 hours left on the clock, I watched the news feed on Ms. Vesper's laptop. It was a local breaking news story. He didn't make it out. As he was being escorted from the facility, he was intercepted by a joint task force of federal agents and local police. He was arrested not just for fraud, domestic abuse, and infidelity, but on multiple counts of money laundering, conspiracy, and involvement with an organized crime ring. The image of him, pale and struggling in handcuffs, his face a mask of shock and betrayal, was the final shattering of the illusion. The police had the ledger, the voice note proving his intent, and the testimony of the 2 betrayed spouses, whose reports of health risks and financial fraud turned a civil matter into a federal investigation. Justice had prevailed. The criminal organization, now in chaos, was focused on damage control, not revenge against the little wife who exposed them. The heroines of the story were the innocent victims, myself, and the 2 spouses, who chose truth over denial. I had completed the impossible task. I had dismantled his life, exposed his crimes, and secured my children's future. The entire structure of his deceit, the affairs, the abuse, the financial control, collapsed under the weight of his own monstrous hubris. The bittersweet freedom. I was safe. My children were safe. I had my life back, but it was a life irrevocably scarred. I was free of the man, but I still carried the ghosts of the trauma bond, the knowledge that I had loved a monster. The victory was bittersweet. I looked at my reflection, no longer the wife, no longer the victim, but a survivor, sharp-edged and battle-worn, forged in the crucible of betrayal. The final, impossible task remained, to heal the silent, invisible wounds and rebuild a life based on truth. I reached into my coat and pulled out the black feather, the symbol of the near miss, the tangible piece of his other life. I walked to the window of the safe house, opened it to the cool night air, and watched as the wind carried the feather away, a final, definitive goodbye to the ghost in my house. The silence now was a promise of a future free from fear, not a threat of impending disaster. The clock had finally stopped ticking.